Hello, and welcome to Life Forces Podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Giulioni. And today we are diving into part 2 of my Reclaim, Activate, Flow series, which is all about my new one-on-one transformative container that I'm so excited to present to you all. And so we're going to be getting into what each stage is meant to help you deal with, is meant to help you transform and transmute. So you get a clearer picture, because a lot of the things that I work with, the modalities that I work with, can seem a little woo-woo and out there, but my thing has always been about making things very tangible, down to earth, practical, and able to use in everyday life. That's very, very important to me in everything I do in my work with clients. Before we dive into the second step, activate, I want to talk a little bit about the current astrology of this week that this episode is dropping in, just for a little bit of context and just because it's such a big part of what I do, obviously, is the astrology aspect and the kind of daily astrology stuff. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update. So on June 17th, we have both Venus and Mercury moving into the sign of Cancer. So this airy Gemini energy, some of it is shifting into the waters of Cancer, and Cancer is, of course, a water sign, but it's also a cardinal sign. So it initiates things. It's about the beginning of things, right? Cancer season is the beginning of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So with this Cancer energy coming in, our focus is more about the emotional aspect of things, sensitivity, and especially nurturing energy, which Cancer is very much about. So Venus and Mercury, right? Venus is our relationships, what we value, beauty, aesthetics, and Mercury is communication, how our minds work, how we're mentally and verbally processing things and making certain connections. So on the 17th, all of that, those two things are shifting into Cancer. So something to note. And then on the 20th, we have the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and that means Cancer season has arrived. So even more so, we're in the waters of our emotions and sensitivity. That's kind of the primary energy that we're dealing with, right? Wherever the sun is, whatever astrological season we're in, that is the main essence that we are going to be experiencing. So something to take note. And yeah, to just enjoy the longest day of the year and bask in the sun and everything that it represents, warmth, being seen, being the center of something, things like that. And on the 22nd of June, last little thing I'm going to talk about, we have the full moon in Capricorn. So I think this full moon in Capricorn is going to be quite interesting. It's squaring Neptune, which makes it a little bit dreamy for a Capricorn full moon because, as you might know, Capricorn energy is very practical and structured and responsible, but Neptune makes things a little bit confusing and dreamy and elusive. So curious to see how that's going to play out. And then also we have Jupiter in Gemini making a beautiful trine to Pluto in Aquarius, which is going to really help us check in with our personal growth and how we are experiencing our own power and expansion. So something to think about on the 22nd of June. It's like the 21st into the 22nd. It's like that evening, just so you know, to just see how things are going, especially when it comes to where you're taking responsibility, how things are evolving on a more long-term basis for you, right? Because Capricorn is very much about like long-term plans and vision and having some stability and structure in your life. So if you like astrology updates like this, I highly recommend first going back to my quarterly astrology episodes. There's going to be a new one for Q3 dropping next week, which will be all about the astrology of July, August, and September. Can you believe we're basically halfway through the year? I cannot. that's another side note. There are those episodes. And then I also highly recommend my monthly horoscopes or holistic horoscopes for Aura Collective. You can find those on auracollective.com and then go to the journal section and you should be able to find them. If you can't find them, just DM me at Life Forces Inc. on Instagram. And even with that, we also do a monthly video forecast on YouTube where we go even deeper about things, or I just emphasize what's really important each month. And then also I write cosmic insights for conscious business every month for Leavely. And those are great too. I have, about 6 different dates in the month that are really interesting for different business related things. And I love that as well. Now let's get back to activate. What is activating all about in my world? Why is it important? And why do we care, right? Why do we care? So on the whole, I just want to emphasize that this whole structure, paradigm, program I've created gives you everything you need to deeply connect to and understand yourself so that you have clarity and conviction on your path forward. Because it's one thing to get some clarity, but then to not feel confident about which next steps to take. It's one thing to feel like convicted in who you are and you know that you're meant for big things, but you don't have clarity on like, what does that look like for you right now? So let's make sure we have both of those so our energy is not scattered anywhere. And energy is the name of the game, especially for this activate step of the process. One of the biggest gifts that the work I've done on myself, for myself in the past little while has been that I don't really experience burnout anymore. Like it just doesn't happen. I know how to work with my own personal energy patterns. I know what times are best to do certain tasks. I know for sure when my body needs to rest, when my mind needs to rest, when I just need to like veg out with an episode of Real Housewives or something else like silly and fun. And it's so important to do that, to figure out your own patterns. And this is like a big thing that we work on both in the activate step and in the flow step, which you will hear about in the third part of this series. That is one of the biggest gifts through this process. And I have realized that focusing on these things, focusing on feeling that life force energy, feeling the things that make us feel alive, and just having energy in general, and also how we can optimize it in different ways, just makes everything in life work better. I really think energy is everything. Mindset is definitely part of that. And that's also something we work on in Reclaim, Activate, Flow. But as I was talking about last time in the Reclaim step, there can be like however many people doing the same job or in the same role, but the energy they bring to it will be different, right? And that's great. We don't want everyone to do the same job the same way, unless you want robots running around these streets. I'm personally okay with none of those. And also, when it comes to optimizing it, like I'm going to talk about this more, optimizing your energy. I want to come to that point or to that idea from a softer place, from not a super like masculine, like achievement place. Of course, we need to have certain masculine structures in place to help us succeed, but it's not really about like achieving. It's about how can we feel better? How can we feel more confident? How can we feel more energized to show up in our everyday life, right? One thing that has really, really come into focus for sure in the past year or so is this idea of doing less to do more and slowing down to speed up. Many, many, many of us are completely overstimulated. We're running on basically empty, and we cannot function without caffeine or other things that make us feel more awake or more focused or whatever it is. And I personally don't think this is a sustainable way to live. And I think most people, or many people, when they really look at it from a different perspective, or when they're forced to slow down because they get sick, they might realize that it's maybe not the best way to move through life. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably feel me, right? Maybe some super high achieving person that just wants to keep going, doesn't really care. But I feel like a lot of my people, people that are attracted to my work, clients I work with, we want something that just feels better in our bodies. We want to feel, if we can't feel amazing every day, let's at least feel good, right? Let's start with good instead of I'm fine, Yeah, I'm sick of I'm fine personally. Let's get something a little more elevated than that. But anyway, so in my personal experience, giving myself less things to do in a day rather than completely jam-packing my schedule, I have been able to accomplish more from a rested place rather than 9% battery, struggling to find my charger or not finding an outlet to plug into, right? Let's stay at a nice 80%. I saw this thing that apparently charging your at least iPhone battery to 80% is the way to go. Maybe it's not 100, but it's a solid 80. Another thing I want to speak about is this idea of feeling activated. So what is feeling activated versus deactivated, let's say, right? So for me, the moments in my life where I felt deactivated, it's just this lethargy, right? It's going through the motions of life. It's okay, I can get up for work, maybe even bring a lunch, maybe even go to the gym before, but something feels off. And that is what I experienced quite often at my last full-time job. It's just this okay, I'm doing all the things, but it's still not feeling great. And I would find myself feeling really apathetic, just being what is the point of all this? I don't know. I think there's times in life where it just feels extra absurd, but not in a fun way. Cause I think life is absurd. And a lot of times it is kind of fun to look at, just be this is so weird. This thing happened or that thing happened. Right. But there's other times where it's just this is absurd in a way that's not cute, And I'm sure you've experienced this too, especially if you're someone who's quite ambitious in one way or another, where you're just is this it? Is this all there is? Going to my job, doing whatever on the weekends, going out and drinking, but not really having fun with it. Is this all there is? Right. And that looks different for different people. For me, a lot of what I experienced was just less interest in going to clubs, for example, when I was living in Berlin and doing that whole thing and staying somewhere for 12 hours or whatever. I was just wow, this used to really be fun, but it is so not fun anymore. Just to get into more of the details, more of the feelings of how I felt at the end of my last full-time job, which was at this online magazine where I was writing about music for them, essentially. So that summer, we kind of had a partnership with 2 music festivals that were 2 weekends in a row at the same site. For a music journalist that is feeling very activated and energized by what they're doing, opportunities like this are really cool. I think also that year, one of our coworkers helped us be styled so that on camera we looked cool, and I didn't have to wear my whatever clothes. I could wear something like really interesting. We got to interview musicians on camera and it was on YouTube and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't care. I really tried to care, but I couldn't. And that's a sign, right? Like that apathy, that just like, whatever, man, is really important. Like, of course, we don't need to be so serious about everything all the time. Like, it's fine. But I couldn't even really have fun with it. I remember whenever I had downtime, whenever I wasn't going to interview someone or doing whatever, all I wanted to do is read Marianne Williamson's A Return to Love and not speak to a soul. If I could have found like some room where I could be completely alone, I probably would have chosen that, but it wasn't possible. And I think we get to these points, whether it's at a job or in some other situation, like maybe a relationship, there's a point where enough is enough. It's just not the right situation anymore. It's just not bringing you joy and giving you energy. And especially if you're a manifesting generator or a generator in human design, we need that sacral excitement to keep us going. But of course, like the other types too, you want to feel energized by what you're doing, right? But it was like with that job, even if I was offered a raise, it would still be a no. Or I remember asking if I could go down to 4 days a week instead of the normal 5 at the same salary, just so I could have more time to do my own things. And I think I like told my boss this and he was like, yeah, I'm going to look into it. But I don't know. I couldn't wait for the answer. And even if the answer was yes, I'm just like, I'm done here. Like, I can't pretend that this is okay for me anymore. And I realized in retrospect that this was a moment where my sacral, which for me is my authority in human design, was absolutely screaming no. And I realized that in retrospect. And that can be a really interesting way to get an understanding more of your human design, like not even with what's going on with you right now, but like looking at past moments and pivotal decisions and like how you were feeling at that time. And were you getting any intuitive hits, right? And so, okay, that's very like deactivated self. Like, what am I doing here? Is this it? I'm bored. I don't get it. I know I'm meant for more, but what the heck is that? Versus for me now, and this evolves, right? Your activated self will be a little different at different points of life. Of course, what activates me and energizes me now, was not the same 5 years ago. But for me now, it's about feeling and being rested, connecting with nature, being able to go with the flow in a given day with the help of some structure, and being able to tune into my intuition and my needs instead of just like forgetting they exist, whether that's physical needs, like I need to eat healthy, or, more emotional needs, like, okay, today is not a night to go out, for example, right? Paying attention to those and actually honoring them how we can. And I think also part of the activated self is really taking full responsibility for being alive, right? Because again, we can just like go through the motions, do the same thing every day. Like for some people that's really cool, but for me, it's not, but it's about, again, going back to reclaiming what's part of us and then actively making it a part of our daily life. For example, I really like reading. That's something that kind of like gives me energy. So it's up to me to make time to read. No one else is going to do that for me, right? Just simple things like that. And it's also about not waiting on external circumstances to shift things within you. Like, oh, I'll have more energy once, I can work 30 hours a week instead of 40 or whatever it is. Or I'll feel better once I'm making more money. You have the power now, right now in this moment, no matter your circumstances, to make yourself feel better, regardless of what's going on. And trust me, these milestones or these goals that we set for ourselves, of course, it's important to have these goals. But if we're pinning everything on those moments, you're probably going to get disappointed. And like, let's enjoy the journey on the way, right? Come on. Like, that sounds way better to me. So being activated is also about not outsourcing your power, right? Like not giving power to your job in a lot of ways. You know, what I do here does not define who I am, right? And that's cool because I can just be almost whatever I want, you know? But we don't want to put things on a pedestal, especially things or people that are external to us, because then we get into a comparison trap, and that's just not going to help you, right? Because you're probably just going to feel inadequate, or you're going to feel better than someone or something. And whether you feel superior or inferior, you're still tapping into your power or feeling power, in my opinion, in a false way, because it's not about comparison. It's about fully embracing your own sense of power without that external validation or without things needing to be a certain way for you to feel good, right? For you to simply feel good. And another thing that I find super important in terms of activating your energy, just feeling more activated and excited and inspired by your life, is developing your intuition. Because another thing is, you don't really waste your own time when you're connected to your own inner voice, right? And a lot of that can be related to your specific intuition or your authority in human design. Like, that's a really helpful way to conceive of it. But just like in general, like, let's think about it. You know, if I trust my sacral response, if I trust that gut yes or no feeling within me when I'm responding to something or when an opportunity presents itself, if I trust what's happening in that moment, because for me, it can really be that simple. It doesn't have to be like deliberating. Isn't that so much faster than like me asking 12 people advice? Like, I have like friends and family members like living everywhere. So it's just like calling or texting people in like 3 different time zones, waiting for their responses, making pro and cons lists, agonizing over things, right? Agonizing instead of trusting what feels right to you. And I promise you, that might sound really scary or unachievable or impossible right now, but you can absolutely get there if you want to. And I guide you through that in a way that's not so intimidating. So much of it is this idea of intuition or listening to your inner voice. A lot of times is spoken about in very vague terms, or it doesn't resonate with everyone. And that's why I really like human design, because we get these different authority types, and that can help us understand what that right feeling or click or whatever even is for you personally, instead of just like, listen to your gut instinct or listen to that inner voice. Like, for some people, it just doesn't come that way, right? Another crucial part of activating your energy and just feeling alive is tapping into different cycles of nature. So if you're listening to this, I'm guessing you're a woman. Hey girl, everyone's definitely welcome, but probably like 95% of my clients are women. So I'm mostly speaking to women here, but even if you aren't a woman and you feel this, totally fine, you know? So in my opinion, this like rise and grind, biohacking, whatever culture does not really work for women, because you most likely have a menstrual cycle At least I hope you do if that's like age appropriate, because having a regular cycle is essentially a vital sign. So our rhythms are infradian, meaning our rhythms that we naturally have and experience last longer than a 24-hour circadian cycle, right? Which is the pattern your body follows based on a 24-hour day, given the sunrise, peak sun, sunset, all of that, right? And circadian rhythm that has to do with the sun is still super important, but without honoring the different phases of our menstrual cycle as women, we totally lose out. And this is something I have definitely learned in the past year or so. Because pushing through certain parts of our cycle can actually make our period symptoms much worse. First of all, who wants that? That freaking sucks. So it's truly a gift to understand the different phases of our cycle, the 4 different phases, not only so we know like when we're ovulating, but to make the most of each part. And this was one of the keys to really activating my power, realizing that there are certain times in the month for focused work, for connecting with people, for recording podcasts, for example, or that are better for retreating and resting and not engaging so much with stuff. This changed everything for me. And another important part of the activate step is getting acquainted with your astrology and human design PowerPoints. So parts of your chart that when you really tap into them, when you really honor them, they can make things skyrocket. They can just make you feel better, bring you amazing things, etc. So looking at certain strengths you naturally have and leaning into them, embodying them, and making sure that you're incorporating certain ways of being into your life in order to strengthen them, because these are things that are just already within you. You might need to exercise the muscles, let's say, before you can really flex them if they're something that you're not really tapping into regularly. But for example, your Mars sign is super important when it comes to energy, when it comes to taking action, when it comes to sharing your passion with others or moving through things from a passionate place. So for example, my Mars is in Leo. Mars is a fire sign. So even though I'm a Cancer sun, Aquarius rising, so that's like water and air energy, that's really familiar to me. So is earth energy with my Virgo moon. I have to remember to tap into the fire in me. For me, sometimes it's about just doing the stuff. I think that's good advice for anyone, but maybe other people are just better at doing that. But sometimes I just have to remind myself, okay, just do the thing, like do it now and think later sometimes, you know? Or also like Leo is so much about creative self-expression and self-expression in general. So I have to really lean into that. I have to make sure the work I'm doing, I feel like I'm expressing myself. For some people that might not be as important, but I've realized for me, it is. You know, it's good for me to have this outlet where I can speak my mind and share things with you. Yeah, it's important. And the final little things I want to talk about, I talked about this a bit last week, and I'm sure I'm going to talk about it next time when we speak about flow as well, is this idea of progress over perfection. Learning more about your astrology and human design, or being exposed to new ideas or making changes, it can feel like a lot of information. And I would always rather people actually implement things and feel they're making progress and, they are making progress, rather than like remembering all the stuff, That's unimportant. The idea here is also, I'm going to give you tools that you can revisit. It's a 3-month container, but maybe a couple months after you're like, you know what? I really need a refresher on this. You go back and it's there. I think also we retain what we need to, and certain things that we've learned or absorbed will come back. So I think it's also about like trusting that. And again, with this progress over perfection thing, it's like, okay, I don't know if anyone has experienced their life completely changing overnight, like in every single area. I don't know if that's possible, right? And I also don't know how comfortable that feels or sustainable that feels, right? So it's more about just little incremental changes every day. Let's be 1% better tomorrow instead of being like, oh, I have to be 100% better tomorrow. I have to change absolutely everything. Just one foot in front of the other, really, right? And also another thing is, I've had, so many days, months, maybe even years where I'm just like, I'm fine. I feel fine. Okay, but do you want to feel fine or do you want to feel really good? Do you want to feel amazing? I personally would rather feel amazing than fine. Of course, is it sustainable to have like amazing, spectacular, incredible days every day? Maybe not, but I can still find the amazing in the days that are not as interesting, for example. Or I can still have feeling amazing and energized and alive be my guiding star, right? My body and everything has changed so much, I would say, since like 2018. A lot of that started with changing what I ate and getting really into Ayurveda and understanding the body from that lens. But still to this day, I'm the kind of person that's like, let's keep trying to feel better, and not in a way that's hard on myself. I think maybe I used to be a little bit like that, like, we got to be better. We got to be perfect. But now I'm more just like, why wouldn't I want to improve? Why wouldn't I want to feel more and more incredible every day, right? And that's totally possible for you. It's just about being realistic, and it's just about committing to it every day and noticing the changes and celebrating the changes, even if they're really small. That's all I've got for Activate. So I hope this episode activated you to take responsibility for yourself and for your energy and for your state, because it is under your control. There's certain events that we can't influence, but we can always choose how we respond to things, right? And so if you feel right now compelled to get into this stuff more and get support in making the changes or the shifts that you need to make, or maybe you don't even know which changes or shifts you need to make and you want to figure that out a little bit, I encourage you to book a free 30-minute call with me. The link is in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Free, no obligation call to see if Reclaim, Activate, Flow would be a good fit for you. And as I believe I said last time, the beta round, which I'm enrolling right now, is going to be over 50% off the full price once I fully launch, because I'm looking for feedback and testimonials. And yeah, I just want it to be a great experience for you, and I know it will be. So again, thank you so much for being here with me. I really appreciate it. If you loved this episode, if it inspired you, please send it to someone in your life who you think it will help, who will love it. I really appreciate when you spread the word about the podcast, because I do this all myself organically. And another thing that's really helpful is if you rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Would super appreciate that. And yeah, if you want to connect with me, all the links are in the description or the show notes, wherever you're listening. Thank you again, sending you so much love, and see you next week.